Hello, and welcome to the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast, where we learn about the ocean, share sea stories, and explore ocean careers. I'm your host, Kara Muzia. Let's dive into today's episode. Hey, do you want to help the oceans? Have you considered a career in marine biology, but maybe just aren't sure where to start? Head on over to my website, marinebio.life, and subscribe to my newsletter. When you subscribe, you'll receive a free PDF download where you'll learn the 7 steps to becoming a marine biologist without the degree. Howdy, mermaids, pirates, ocean lovers, and land lovers. Welcome to today's show. I am so excited to share with you today's conversation with one of my personal conservation heroes, Dr. Carl Safina. Dr. Safina's work explores how humans are changing the living world and what those changes mean for wild places and for other human beings. His work has won the MacArthur Genius Prize, Pew and Guggenheim Fellowships, book awards from the Lannan, Orion, and the National Academies, and the John Burroughs, James Beard, and George Rabb medals. Safina hosted the 10-part PBS series, Saving the Ocean with Carl Safina, and he holds the Endowed Chair for Nature and Humanity at Stony Brook University, and he is also the founder of the not-for-profit Safina Center. On the show today, we dive into how a boy from Brooklyn became a world-renowned ecologist and author focused on saving the natural world. We take a peek into the commercial fishing world, and Carl shares a bit from his latest book, including his time in the Caribbean studying sperm whales. We packed a lot into this hour-long episode. Enjoy. Carl Safina, welcome to the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast. I am so thrilled to have you on the show today.
Well, I'm really delighted to be with you today.
You've had quite the career, from working in the field to writing books, producing documentaries, and you've been a powerful voice for our oceans and nature as a whole. What inspired you to start a career in the natural sciences?
I just always loved nature. Living things, mostly animals. I just always loved animals. I grew up in an apartment in Brooklyn, not a wild place by any means. There were not many animals around at all, but my father's hobby was raising canaries, so I got to see the lives of birds at extremely close range. I could watch birds getting on and off their eggs and feeding their tiny hatchlings from 3 inches away, and most people don't get to do that. And for some reason, I just found that extremely compelling and totally fascinating. Then when I was 7, I started raising homing pigeons in the backyard. I didn't really get to see a wild place until I was 9, and we went to the mountains in the Catskill Mountains in New York, lower New York State, for a month. So it may be that I was, a combination of tantalized by these very close range experiences that I could see so intimately, and then also feeling like nature itself was a very wonderful, very rare thing, not something that I was near or around. So it might have been those things, but anyway, I wanted to make that my life and try to figure out how to make a living doing what I loved, which was being around animals, being outdoors, being around natural things, natural systems, not farm animals. I didn't grow up anywhere near a farm, but it was always the natural world that really grabbed me, and the behavior of animals that grabbed me. So I just tried to do that for my working life, and much to my surprise, in fact, my total amazement, it worked.
It has. You've had quite the illustrative career. So when you graduated high school, you knew you wanted to work in the natural sciences. What made you choose the colleges that you did attend? And I mean, you went all the way through and got your PhD. Is this something that you knew you wanted right out the gate?
Well, it's kind of a short, sad story, because I had essentially no mentoring or guidance. And when I told my high school guidance counselor that I was interested in animals, she thought that I should go to an agronomy school become a farmer. She didn't really know what any other work with animals could possibly mean, I think. And I knew that that was way off base for me. It wasn't at all what I was talking about. But I had simply no idea how anybody does anything like research on wild animals. I only knew that I saw some of that on television. But my parents were of no additional help. And further, my father told, they didn't have much money at all. My father told me, well, you're just going to the local community college, and maybe after 2 years, we'll see what happens. So I went to the local community college. It was absolutely awful. It was actually much worse than my high school. I had gone to a rather progressive public high school where they had some interesting programs and people coming in and stuff like that. And the community college was just deadening. And then a friend of mine who was in that community college with me, who I had known since I was 10 years old, had applied to another state university school. And he was going for an interview and simply asked me if I felt like taking a ride with him. So I took a ride with him, and that's how I found out about that school. So it's not at all like people coached me and told me what to do, or I figured it out, or I understood anything. I understood nothing, and I was really bumbling around, not knowing at all how to get started. And what I think is even stranger is that after I got my bachelor's degree and had been in a 4-year college being taught by people with PhDs, I didn't understand what graduate school was, or what a master's degree was, or really what a PhD was. And I remember I had a professor in my last semester of my senior year at college who I liked really a lot, and he was doing some research on birds, and I volunteered to help him, which was sort of a first step. And one day I just got all my courage together, and I said, can you explain to me what is a master's degree? And he eventually wound up introducing me to the woman who became my thesis advisor for both my master's degree and my PhD. So it's not like I really knew where I was heading. I didn't. I only knew what I wanted to avoid, which was going into business. And I knew what I wanted to do in a sense, which was be outdoors studying wild animals. But I didn't understand anything about what you have to do. And it's really remarkable how starting so slowly and so cluelessly, things eventually pulled together.
Yeah, that really is remarkable. I love that you got your start volunteering in a lab. I think that's something that I tell a lot of my listeners is to get experience volunteering usually, because that's the best way that people are able to incorporate people into their work, right? And then you actually we're not afraid to ask questions like, how do you actually get a master's degree?
Yes. Well, we were not in a lab when I asked that question. We were walking around in a tern colony by the beach. That's
Mm.
I volunteered to do the work with him, and it was entirely outdoors. It was a little bit of exactly what I had always wished for. I had done some things before that, not much. When I was in high school, I found out about a guy who was doing bird banding, and he was just doing it as a hobby. It didn't lead to any connections, but it gave me some skills. I learned a lot of birds I didn't even know existed. I learned how to put bands on their legs, handle them, take them out of nets and things like that. That all was those were skills that I used a lot later on.
Hmm.
And when I was in the summer between my junior and senior year as an undergrad, I I very, very energetically sought out and volunteered for a project where peregrine falcons were being raised in captivity at Cornell University, they had been almost entirely wiped out by DDT and other hard pesticides, but those pesticides had been banned for a few years. People at Cornell were breeding the falcons, and then it was time to start trying to reintroduce them. And I was able to get a volunteer job, well, paid a little bit, it's mostly a volunteer job, reintroducing, putting the baby falcons out and taking care of them for about 6 weeks until they were flying strongly and starting to disperse. And that was really fantastic. But that, again, didn't really lead me to anything. It wasn't until the professor who was working on the terns that doors, he started to open some doors to me, and things started to get started.
He started to open doors for you, and that's what ultimately led to your master's. You studied seabirds for both your master's and your PhD, correct?
Yes, not coincidentally. And yeah, I forget what I was just about to say, but that's when things started to, I started to see how people actually study things professionally, what it means to be a professor at a university, and all these things that I really didn't understand very well before.
I like that he opened those doors for you. So what, out of curiosity, what exactly did you study? What were your thesis for your master's or your PhD?
Well, I got a bachelor's degree in environmental science, and then I went into an ecology program at Rutgers University.
Mm-hmm.
I studied black skimmers, which are a type of seabird, a very unusual type of seabird that nests in colonies. And then for my PhD, I studied common terns and their relationship to the fish that they eat and to the larger predatory fish that are both their best friends and their worst enemies, because the predatory fish drive the little fish up to the surface, where the terns can sometimes get really a lot of them, but they also eat so many of those small fish themselves, the larger fish do, that eventually they make the food for the terns very scarce. So it was a very unusual double-edged relationship that I was studying. And that's what I did for my PhD.
That is unusual. We have I think one of my favorite terns is here in Florida. We get the little least terns that nest in their colonies.
Oh, yes.
They're super tiny and adorable. I think that's probably one of my favorites.
Yeah, they are wonderful.
So I wanted to chat with you about fisheries. I'm currently reading your book, Song for the Blue Ocean. And it's really great, super enlightening. And you get up and close and personal with the commercial fishing world. And in the first part of the book, you start to look at what happened to the bluefin tuna. And the premise of why you were doing boots on the ground research is because you wanted to put a moratorium or significantly reduce the catch limits of the tuna. And you had put a proposal into Congress to do this. And naturally, the commercial fishermen are
not into Congress, but into CITES, which is an international treaty organization that handles trade in species they designate as endangered. They can ban the trade of certain species if they designate them as endangered.
I gotcha. So you're looking for this endangered designation for the bluefin.
Right.
And the commercial fishermen naturally were very upset because that's their livelihood. And some of them thought that you and the science that supported this proposal were incorrect. So you actually went out with them and you flew through the air with these commercial fishermen and plowed through the seas in search of the answer. And one of the things that struck me was your communication with them. You had very differing opinions, and everything seemed to remain civil. So how are you most able to so effectively communicate with these fishermen?
Well, I do a lot of fishing, and I like fishing. I like being around the water and boats. I generally know what I'm talking about. So we could have conversations. And for the most part, with a couple of exceptions, I like them all personally. It's just that this fish that they were fishing for was being very depleted, and it generally isn't one person's fault. It's that there's just too much of something going on. So for the most part, we got along well. I liked them, and things were almost always civil. Yes. Oddly enough, some of the fishermen disliked each other a lot more than they disliked me at times.
I could kind of see that. Essentially they're direct competition, right? So
Yes. They all blamed each other because they use different kinds of fishing gear. So the ones that use certain kinds of gear called long lines, they would say, we can't catch the last fish. Then the ones that see them from the air and put nets around them said, well, we can only catch the ones that are at the surface. It's the ones with the long lines that could catch the last fish. And then the harpooners said, well, we only throw spears at them. It's very inefficient. We could never catch the last fish. And the hook and line people said, we catch so few, one at a time, we could never catch the last fish. And nobody could catch very many fish. But for some reason, all of them were going out of business because there were not very many fish left.
What ended up happening with the CITES designation?
It failed. It failed mainly because Japan, well, you go to these meetings and there are different countries. It's a little bit like the UN kind of a thing. And and there are procedures and rules. And Japan, which was the main importer of these fish, made sure that when the bluefin tuna proposal came up for a debate, that they invoked some procedural thing that actually prevented any debate from happening in exchange for kind of a vague promise to track the catch better. And that's why it failed. But it did put enough pressure on the fishing countries to reduce the catches for a few years. It made a difference. I think things would have been a lot worse if we hadn't tried that and if we hadn't gone through that process. Later on, about 10 years later, it was tried again. I was not in that process that time, the second time. And it was made to fail again because they're very good at kind of rigging the process in their favor, as we're kind of seeing in other branches of government these days.
Interesting. So, this book was written in the 1990s, correct? What has remained the same or different about the tuna fishing industry since then, or as a result? Hey, Kara here. I hear it all the time. How do I become a marine biologist? Or my niece wants to help the ocean. Where does she even start? I hear from students, yes, and also nurses, HR professionals, and other mid-career folks who wonder if they could still make their dream of working with sea turtles or sharks come true, wondering if it's too late to answer the ocean's call. Here's what I've learned after 20 years in the field and hundreds of interviews. There's no straight line, no magic degree, and no gatekeeper. You create the path forward. If this sounds overwhelming and vague, I've created 2 tools to help you stop wondering what if and start moving forward with clarity and purpose. The first is my free guide, Be a Marine Biologist Without the Degree. Over 1,000 people have already downloaded this guide and taken their first step towards ocean impact. Inside, you'll find 7 concrete, doable actions to help you get started, whether you're just exploring or ready to make a change. Then there's the Ocean Blueprint. This is a 30-day self-paced course that helps you build your unique path into ocean science and conservation without quitting your job or going back to school. Inside the Ocean Blueprint, you'll get daily prompts to explore your interests, skills, and next steps, a structure that turns overwhelm into real momentum, and a bonus section to root your work into ocean connection. You don't have to wait for a degree, a perfect plan, or permission. Whether you're wading in or ready to take the deep dive, these tools are here to help you move from dreaming to doing. The ocean called. Are you ready to answer? Links in the show notes and on my website, karagracemuzia.com. I can't wait to see the waves you'll make.
Around the world, the tuna fishing has greatly intensified. The world population of humans has greatly increased, and many more species of tuna are much more depleted than they were then. The bluefin tuna has kind of limped along at a low level. They haven't been wiped out. They're still caught. There's still a lot of pressure on them. They certainly have not been allowed to recover. And then there's a good year of young fish, but when they start to get big enough, most of them get caught and the population never really gets to recover. It just sort of bounces along at a low level. And around the world, other types of tuna fishing has been better developed since that book. And those fish are not in good shape. Many of them are considered overfished. We certainly see far, far less of the 5 species of tuna that live off of New York, the waters off of New York. We used to see them a lot and catch them a lot, and the fishing has become really quite poor most of the time. Really, it's really kind of terrible now. So yeah, I've seen a lot more depletion since then.
And the same could be said, I think, for most fishing industries.
Around most of the world, that's true. But ironically, the United States has one of, if not the best, fisheries management regimes since the late 1990s. After I worked on the Bluefin Tuna Initiative, we worked to overhaul the fishing law in the United States with a thing called the Sustainable Fisheries Act, which we managed, again, just shocking ourselves, we managed to get Congress to pass. And it requires that fishery managers let depleted populations of fish recover. So in the waters of the United States, we have a lot of recovering fish populations that are in much better shape now than they were 20 years ago. But the fish that are the big migratory ones that spend a lot of their lives outside U.S. waters and are subject to international management are doing generally poorly. And those are most of the tunas, most of the billfishes, most of the sharks. There are a couple of exceptions. White sharks, which are more coastal, are increasing very noticeably. And swordfish on our side of the ocean are increasing noticeably. They used to be pretty abundant. All these things really used to be quite abundant, but they also used to be in a lot worse shape 20 years ago. But the rest of the world, fishing has continued to just grind the fish populations down lower and lower for the most part, just, to make a generalization.
Kind of shifting gears a little bit into more sustainable fishing. I watched your PBS series, Saving Our Oceans, which my husband and I thoroughly enjoyed. And you traveled around and you visited different places that have different versions of sustainable fishing. And one of them that struck me was a small island off Zanzibar called Masali, I think it was pronounced.
Yes, we were based in Pemba, and the island that they were protecting is called Masali, yes.
Okay.
Those are both off the coast of Tanzania. They're part of the group of islands that is referred to as the Zanzibar Archipelago.
Wonderful. So one thing that struck me was that they intentionally use mesh that fish can easily see so that they reduce the bycatch and they only catch the fish that they want. And then you also traveled to Mexico, where a similar model was in place that people regulate their own fishery. And then I just thought that it was really fascinating that all these smaller groups of much poorer areas kind of all work together for a sustainable fishery. So these are just some examples. In your opinion, what does a sustainable fishery look like, and what are other hallmark examples of how to regulate a fishery?
Well, I think, sustainable means that you can keep doing it without hurting the resource.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter of letting them breed faster than you kill them. And there's a lot of different ways to configure that depending on where you are, what you're fishing for. What are you, is it the tropics? Is it a coral reef? Is it a place where you're catching fish that are only there 3 months out of the year and migrating around the rest of the ocean the rest of the time? So there's all different ways. An interesting thing about the two examples that you mentioned is that the local people had the authority, they had the legal authority to regulate themselves in this local area, and they depended really heavily on the health of that area. So the feedback loop between the health of the resource and their own lives was very direct and very short. We could never really do that in most of the United States because we have fisheries that ship things all over the place. We have fish coming in from all over the world. We don't have a system where local people can fish locally and be in charge of that area because it's a free country and people can go all up and down the coast with their boats if they want to.
Mm-hmm.
And they can go out to sea for weeks at a time and potentially even go not only into international waters, but they could go into the waters of other countries. Most countries don't allow that to happen anymore. So the thing is that the feedbacks are not as direct. So if people here on, let's say, the East Coast, if they deplete their local area, they'll just go farther. And that's kind of the story of fish depletion is the local thing gets depleted, the easy thing gets depleted, you go farther, you fish harder. You need bigger boats. Bigger boats can go even farther. And that's the way it is. But these poor people, as you noted, they're poor and their options are limited. So if they don't take care of what they have, it's catastrophic for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a big incentive for getting together and agreeing and taking it easy. But the other part is you can't have a lot of pressure from the outside, or you have to be able to defend and enforce against that. And that requires that you not live in a place where there's just loads and loads of people all over the coast, that there has to be some room.
Mm-hmm.
And those situations are also not that easy to come across, especially in the United States and other developed places.
That's very true. Yeah, the two examples that I gave, they did seem to be a little bit more remote.
Yeah.
I mean, they were very remote.
Right.
Something else, kind of on a different vein of sustainability, we mentioned earlier long lining, and kind of what seems to me to be the long lining would be single hook and line, or the swordfish harpooners that you went out with off of St. George's Bank. In my head, that would be a more sustainable fishery because you have no bycatch. So the only fish that's harmed, it's not like you collect them in lots and lots of lines and you're not sure what you're going to catch, or in a huge net, that the harpooners are only catching what they shoot, essentially.
Yeah, they actually have to stick the fish in the back. I mean, they don't shoot at it. They don't even throw the harpoon. They jam it into the back of the swordfish. So needless to say, that's a lot less efficient than a net that's miles long or a long line that is tens of miles long with hundreds of hooks on it.
Mm-hmm.
And their overhead is lower. What it takes to make a profit is a lot less fish, and they have zero bycatch. There's nothing that they catch that they're not trying to catch, and all they're trying to catch is swordfish. And they cannot catch babies either. They have to have big enough fish that they can hit with the harpoon.
Right. And I'm sure that there are also regulations on that. But for them, it's not, even if there weren't regulations for them, it may not actually be worthwhile to shoot or to stick a smaller fish anyway.
Yeah, there are a lot of limitations. They do have an overall quota. They can only fish in very good weather. It has to be a flat sea where you can see if a swordfish is swimming near the surface. The fish are not there all year round. So it's really very limited. And when people could only harpoon swordfish before long lines were really developed or these huge monofilament nets were even invented, there were just plenty of swordfish around. I mean, the amount of fish that people saw, if you read about what people wrote in the 50s about how many swordfish they saw, it's mind-boggling from what you would see nowadays. But as I said, nowadays it's better than it was 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been on 2 of those trips, widely separated in time. I think they were about 10 years apart. And the second trip, it was much better. You could see that there were more fish around.
That's really heartening to hear.
Yeah, it was heartening. Yeah.
So I watched your TED Talk of your last book, Beyond Words, What Animals Think and Feel, and you open with something that kind of gets you. You go into how amazing octopuses are and that they use tools like eight and they can recognize faces. And mostly we enjoy them boiled, which got some laughs from the audience. And then you kind of like sit and think about it. And I thought this is a really poignant way of highlighting how we treat animals that don't necessarily look like us or inhabit the same terrestrial environment. In your TED Talk, you advocate for and thinking about animals as other living creatures more. They have neurons that fire the same way that our neurons fire. And I read on your website that you advocate for eating more mindfully. What exactly does that look like for you, and how has that changed over the years?
Yeah, I think it's important to say what it looks like for me, because I'm not in the business of telling people what to eat. So for me, here's how I look at it. I live on the coast here, and we can go clamming and we can catch some fish that are abundant, and I do both of those things. So I'm not vegan and I'm not vegetarian because of that. However, farming of all kinds has a lot of problems associated with it that I would prefer to have little to do with. Like most people, I can't raise all my own fruits and vegetables, so I do buy some of those things, but I try to limit what I buy, even the vegetables that I buy. And as far as farmed animals, I don't order I don't order the meat or the products of farmed animals. I don't buy milk. I don't buy meat. I don't order meat in restaurants. And that's not because it's bad for things to die, because everything dies. It's because in farming, animals are made to live much worse than they are made to die. And the cruelty of that bothers me. The environmental effects of the tremendous amount of landscape that is ruined and disrupted bothers me. And even for vegetable farming, the amount of fuel, the amount of pesticides, the unnaturalness of it, the amount of land that is no longer available for any other living things is really a terrible thing. And so, I buy as much as I can. I buy from local greengrocers. small local farms, and as I say, I also eat some of these fish and shellfish that I get myself, and that's my diet for me, and those are the reasons for me. There's an article on the web you can see. It's called "What I Eat" by me, Carl Safina, and it explains this in some detail. So that's my story.
Thank you for highlighting that. I think it's something that people have a disconnect about, particularly as it pertains to the oceans, that and the environmental impacts of farming both vegetables and animals. And I like that in your TED Talk, and just now you highlighted that farmed animals don't get to live that they were meant to, right? So when you go out fishing or when you go out clamming, that fish or clam is living its wild life as it was meant to, up until a predator came and ate it, and you just happen to be that predator. So that I feel like it's more of a circle of life way of looking at things versus the factory way.
Well, that is how I see it, and I do think that it is, I think that is real. I'm not denying that fish feel pain and stress and panic when they're hooked, but
Mm-hmm.
they get to be who they're supposed to be until a very short interval of time when I interfere with their life and create my own food by doing so.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm mindful of how I fish. I'm mindful of how the fish die on my boat. We make them die very quickly and very easily by sliding them into a bath of ice water.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I think there are compromises, and that's kind of my compromise. But I also like that I take the responsibility for creating some of my food. I wouldn't want to entirely be buying all the food that I eat and get none of it from the real world. We have a small vegetable garden at my home. We're not very good vegetable gardeners because we're not consistent enough at it. We're not home enough to always take care of it, but we do grow some of our food, and that's very, very gratifying also. We never use any pesticides at all.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I should mention, we do have several hens that lay eggs, and they get let out of the coop every day into an unfenced yard that is surrounded by woods on two sides and a backyard and a street on the other two sides. They're completely unrestrained, and they come out at will, and they go back in the evening, and we close them up for their own safety. So I think as far as their experience of their lives, it's about as good as any laying hen gets. Um, and when they stop laying, when they get a little old and they stop laying, we're very happy to have them there as companion animals. I don't mean that in the formal sense, but we just enjoy having our chickens around. So, they mostly their end comes from old age. Every couple of years, a hawk gets one,
Mm-hmm.
and that's part of life as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is a certain satisfaction of making your own food. We do have a vegetable garden here as well, and we're not as consistent as you mentioned, but there is a satisfaction of being able to go out to your own yard and collect your food. And my next door neighbors have chickens. I haven't ventured into that yet, but I love hearing them.
Uh-huh.
And but he has to build a fortress, otherwise the hawks get them on the regular. It's a big fortress, but they're in it.
Yeah, we have hawks regularly around here, and yet we lose about one chicken every 2 years. It's really surprised me how few hawk attacks we've had.
Hmm.
We have a lot of bushes in the yard, and I noticed in the winter when the hawks would be hungrier and the birds would be more exposed because the leaves are off the trees. They do
Hmm.
spend more time under the bushes. There's a lot of places where they can kind of tuck out of view.
Hmm.
They do that. So anyway,
Digressing from chickens.
we got from bluefin tuna to chickens.
We're going all over the map today.
Yes.
So I want to chat a little bit about the Safina Center. I read that you founded the Blue Oceans Institute, but when I typed that in, I get the Safina Center. So did the Blue Oceans Institute morph into the Safina Center? And then what inspired you to start this?
Well, even less than morph, we just changed the name
Okay.
because because the phrase blue ocean was appearing in the names of many things. There
Yes.
was a trucking company, an electrical company, a business management strategy, a Christian evangelical sect, and they were all called Blue Oceans. And there's more and more now that I've noticed. So the other thing was that people didn't understand that Blue Ocean Institute was connected to me or that I was connected to Blue Ocean Institute. So one of my board members, whose business is named after him, said, "Why don't you just name it after you?" And that won't be confusing anymore to anybody. And I said, well, I don't want anybody to think that, it's an ego thing for me and I have to have my name on it. But we tried it and nobody seemed to think it was an ego thing for me. And it's a lot less confusing. So it is the same thing, although we've changed what we do. I think we've been at it now for 17 years. Yeah, 17 years. And at first we had more of a staff with more programs of different kinds, and we've narrowed the focus to creative products that reflect what we know scientifically about conservation and nature. We also are not 100% focused on the ocean anymore. Well, a lot of what we do is focused on non-ocean kinds of conservation matters and issues. So when I say creative products, I mean people who are writers, people who are photographers, filmmakers. One person is a sound artist. We only have one person who is a scientist who mainly does science.
Mm.
The rest of I'm a scientist who mainly writes nowadays, and the other people are, like I say, they're journalists, they're filmmakers, other kinds of writers, and things like that.
And now, do you call these other people that are affiliated with the Safina Center? These are your fellows?
Yes, those are
So
our fellows. Yes.
I really like that term. It's, I don't know. It's just
What
like very chummy. I
What
like
do you like about
because it's just like, oh, these are my fellows. Like, I don't know. It's very familial sounding.
Well, I never thought of it that way, but I don't want to be anybody's boss. I don't want to tell them what to do. I don't want to write job descriptions. I've
Hmm.
done a lot of that, and I'm over it. So I want to work with people whose work inspires me and whose work is so creative or so awesome that I just get an enormous kick out of it. So those are the people that we seek, and those are the people that we have. We don't advertise. We don't even advertise for the fellowships. We go after people whose work has raised their profile and somehow gotten on my radar and gotten my attention.
Gotcha. That was one of my questions. What does it take to become a fellow, and what does it mean to be a Safina Center fellow?
Well, what it takes is you kind of have to know a lot and do work that is accurate and factual, but do it in a way that the product of the work is really intended to move people emotionally. For instance, we have one of our fellows is a woman who paints primates that she has cared for, orphan primates that she has cared for and known personally. So she paints these very intimate, very individual portraits. And you might say, well, that's not science. And I would say, yeah, that's not science. It's not everything that we do is science, but it's very accurate. It's more accurate than saying, here's a picture of a rhesus macaque. It's here's this picture of Dolly, the macaque that I raised for 2 years
Hmm.
when I was working in Cameroon. So we go deep and we do things that are not easy to do, that require a lot of what you could call witnessing, people who are really out there and they're really bringing stories back and bringing experiences back. So it's those kinds of people. That's our focus now. If you look at the earlier fellows who are already termed out, people who are no longer fellows with us, some of them did more sciencey kinds of science and more policy work, but we're focusing more and more on people who are doing more artistic kinds of work and translation.
Well, thank you for that. When we spoke last week, you mentioned you have a new book coming out, and I'm really curious about it. Would you mind telling the audience a bit more about it and when it will be released?
It will be released in April. I actually have, before I get to that, let me just say I have two books that are being released in April. One of them is the second of a two-part young readers adaptation of my last book, which is called Beyond Words. So we did a two-part adaptation of that for young readers, meaning adolescents, and maybe ages like 11 to 16 or something in there.
Mm-hmm.
The first part of that came out this past year, and the second part is coming out in April. But also in April, the book you're referring to, it's called Becoming Wild. And that book is about cultures of non-human animals. Now, by definition, they're social non-human animals because culture is what you learn socially. But the themes of the book are how animal cultures raise families, create beauty, and achieve peace. And there are three focal animals in the book: sperm whales, macaws, and chimpanzees. And there are many dozens of others that are mentioned throughout the book in different ways to illustrate different things and give different examples and tell different stories.
That's fascinating. Would you mind sharing an example? I'm very curious. What does a creative culture look like for a sperm whale or even a macaw?
Well, sperm whales are really surprising. First of all, their social structure is a lot like African elephants. They live in female-led groups where it's an older female is sort of the matriarch or leader. Her daughters are with her, and their children are with them. And then when the male children become adolescents, they leave the family and they live a different kind of a life than the females do. So that's a lot like African elephants right there. But the other thing about them is that they are not only in family groups, but the family groups form what scientists call clans. The clans are identified with codes of clicks. The whales make clicks, and they use clicks for sonar, but they use them a different way for sonar, and then they use them another way as a code for their identity. So they're able to say, I am so-and-so with the such and such family, and we are members of the such and such clan. And sperm whales are the only known creatures besides humans where they have the ability to understand whether strangers that they've never met before are in their social group or not in their social group. So we humans would do that with things like flags or language or religion, or we have lots of different ways of identifying different kinds of groups that a stranger we meet is either in or out of our group. Sperm whales have these clans, but most other social animals have to know everybody individually in their group. So even though elephants may know hundreds of other elephants from different families, they wouldn't know by a signal whether an elephant that is a stranger is in their group. There's no such thing as being in an elephant group if they are a stranger. If they're a stranger, they're simply not in your group. not in your population. But sperm whale clans can be thousands of whales spread over enormous distances of ocean, and yet within the same area there may be a couple of other clans, and they will socialize with members of their own clan, and they will not socialize with members of a different clan. All of this is really pretty astonishing, and it's just been learned in the last maybe 30 years or so, and people are still studying it and still learning it better and better. So that's an example.
Did you get to do any field research for this book?
Everything I write is based on field research. So I went to the Caribbean to be with sperm whales and the scientists. I went to Peru to be with macaws and the scientists, and I went to Uganda to be with chimpanzees and the scientists. And they were all wild animals, not free living animals, not in cages or captive groups.
Amazing. That's incredible. So you got to see sperm whales down in the Caribbean.
I did, yes.
Were you up close and personal at all, or is it more from, I see a fluke in the distance?
Sometimes just about close enough to touch.
Oh man, that's incredible.
It's incredible, yes. I think the most amazing thing about my life is that I somehow, in this almost magical way, I somehow have the ability of contacting the scientists whose work most interests me and saying, can I come and spend a couple of weeks with you? And they say, okay, and then I go. And that's completely incredible.
It really is. And you've had some wonderful experiences.
Yeah, mind-blowing experiences.
Well, thank you for sharing your new book. I'll definitely put a link to your website and all of that in the show notes, and refer to your new books coming out in April. I have a couple final questions for you before we wrap up. What is your favorite field story or stories to tell? I know when we chatted before, you mentioned you literally had hundreds, if not more than that. So I'm looking for maybe the most illustrative stories, and this could be the most incredible day. Like, I rode a sperm whale. Probably not wild animal, or like kind of the worst day, and you can't believe you even made it back, but that happened, and it's a really illustrative story.
Well, let's skip the worst day.
Okay, sounds good.
I'll go, and I should say that almost every day in and around any kind of field site has been utterly interesting and beautiful and fantastic. So the worst part is usually the drive to the airport from my house.
Fair enough.
But I'll just tell you one story about an amazing place. And I know I was there about 12 days, and it kind of happened every evening, but I remember it as one occurrence. And what it is that I was on a little tiny island in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands called Lannan. And I was there when I was studying and writing about Lannan albatrosses for my book, Eye of the Albatross. Mm-hmm. On Lannan, the island is about 3 miles across. You can walk around it in a couple of hours. Usually when you're on land anywhere, even on a lot of islands, you're on land and you look out to sea. But this island was so small that it gave you the impression that you're on an ocean planet on a little patch of emergent land. And since most of the planet is ocean, the planet's surface is ocean, it was a much more realistic impression of life than I've really ever gotten anywhere else. And on this little island, there are literally millions of seabirds, and a lot of them are fishing during the day, and many of them come back at night. Some of them are nocturnal, but the nocturnal ones then leave at night. So during the end of the day, around sunset, there is this chatter that's been going on all day that gets turned up to an incredible roar,
Mm.
an incredible roar of millions of birds streaming in and streaming out in all directions from the center of this planet, this little dot of land, out to the circular ocean horizon. And it made me sense really viscerally what the planet has been like for most of its history. A planet not dominated by human beings or the noise of motors or things like that. And it was very, very powerful to be there. I'm incredibly lucky to have experienced that, and it has always stayed with me.
Mm. What a beautiful moment. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks for asking.
What advice would you give to an aspiring marine biologist or somebody that wants to pursue a career in the natural sciences?
Well, the advice I would give is ignore everybody who's telling you that that's not practical. Ignore anybody who's telling you you can't make a living doing that, or you can make more money doing this or that, or whatever they want you to do, because what they want you to do is probably not what you want to do.
Mhm.
And to pursue what you want to do, thinking that one thing does tend to lead to another. If you pursue it really energetically, if you make as many connections along the way as you're going through, try to meet as many people as you can, go to conferences if you can, volunteer if you can. And most people I know who've done that, probably everybody I know who's done that, has really connected with their future and gotten to do what they were trying to do and had a very, very interesting time along the way.
Great advice. Two more things and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure. Okay.
What is your favorite sea creature and why? And I'm very curious about this
Oh,
answer.
I hate this question.
So I've had guests give me a vertebrate and an invertebrate, if that helps at all.
Well, I mean, you have to say what are you talking about when you say sea creature? Is an albatross a sea creature
Yeah,
or
I've counted seabirds in the past.
okay, well, then we'll go.
Albatross.
I'll give you three. We'll go with wandering. I mean, they're a literal. First of all, it's not a contest because a lot of these creatures are just they're just so wonderful, and many of them I've gotten to know personally, and I love them, and I'm inspired by them, and I'm awed by them all the time. So that's why I hate the question. So I'll just give you three that are among the highlights for me.
Perfect.
One is wandering albatross, only because I love seabirds. Albatrosses are the most extreme seabirds, and wandering albatrosses are basically the most extreme albatrosses. So we'll go with wandering albatross. And then,
Wait, how are they so extreme? You gotta explain that.
well, they have the largest wings in nature.
Hmm.
They often fly hundreds of miles without flapping, and they can spend years at sea without coming back to land. So that's pretty extreme.
Yes.
And and then two that I've known personally, kind of intimately for a lot of my life, mako shark and bluefin tuna. Both of them are, they all get big. All three of these things get big. Maybe that's a guy thing. I don't know. But, they get your attention, certainly, when you see something that can weigh hundreds of pounds and is incredibly powerful and sleek, beautiful, fast. In the case of these two creatures with gills that I just mentioned, the bluefin tuna and the mako, they are both warm-blooded to different extents, which many animals with gills are not warm-blooded, but they are, and it shows in how they move and what they do. Um, and they're just spectacular. They're extremely beautiful, extremely powerful, and spectacular in the way that they move, the way that they jump into the air, and the splashes they create, and all that kind of stuff. So, and fast.
And fast. Magnificent creatures all around.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Those are 3 great animals. I don't think
I have
anybody has
about
said those
another
3
50, but we ran out of time.
yet. Okay. Last thing before we sign off here, I always have an ask for the audience at the end for them to go out and do something. And it's usually something fairly simple and actionable. And when we chatted before, you had something. Would you mind sharing?
I always say that nobody can do everything, and it paralyzes a lot of people because they say, well, I'm only one person, I can't do everything. But everybody in history was only one person. So what I would like people to do is something. Just do something. Pick one thing and focus on it and do that. In the meantime, we all make decisions every day that matter, and they have to do with what we will eat, what we will drive, what kind of energy we might use if we own a home, who we will vote for, what kinds of issues we will talk about, how many children we will have, and things like that.
Wonderful. Well, Carl, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, I enormously appreciate what you're doing and that you were interested in talking to me. So thank you so much.
Hey, one more thing. Do you want to dive more into the ocean and marine biology? Need a little guidance on ocean conservation? Head on over to marinebio.life/resources. We've got book recommendations, job posting pages, conference suggestions, and ocean-friendly products. All recommendations have been personally vetted by me, and I will continue to add to the collection as I come across cool things to share. Head on over to marinebio.life/resources to learn more. See you over there. Thank you for listening to today's show. I'd love to hear any insight you've gleaned. Leave a comment in the show notes or send me an email over at marinebio.life. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a review and, of course, share with your friends. If you want more resources for ocean news, including conservation topics and careers, plus personal insight from me that I just don't share anywhere else, join me at marinebio.life and sign up for email updates. Keep after your dreams and making waves in your community. One person can make a difference. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time on the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast.